Welcome to another episode of Alma Ensemble Summer Interview Series. We're here with Sarah Wardle-Jones.
Hi.
Erica Sipes.
Hello.
And I am Michelle Smith-Johnson, and we are the co-founders of the Alma Ensemble, a chamber music collective based in Roanoke, Virginia. We are thrilled to have the brilliant New Orleans-based mezzo-soprano Megan Ihnen with us today. Welcome, Megan. We are so glad to see you. How are you?
I am so glad to see you. This is really wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Recently moved to New Orleans, so I was living in Iowa up until November. And so it's definitely weird to experience moving to a new city and then self-quarantining, I suppose. But it's been beautiful, and I love warm weather, and so I'm really happy to be here.
That's really, really great. Good. Well, hopefully you'll be able to explore the city sooner than later. So we're so thrilled to have you today. Thank you for being with us again. Your career is so extensive. You're involved heavily in the new music scene. You've done major performances, commissioned new works. You actively tour with all kinds of ensembles. You present workshops and master classes, as well as career coaching. So it would take forever, a dozen interviews to get through all of the things that you do. So let's talk about all of it. Take us on the journey of your career path. Like, how did all this come to be? Did projects sort of overlap on themselves, or just sort of take us through your story a little bit?
Sure. Great. Yep. So I am a mezzo-soprano. I studied voice and multiple instruments. So I play viola and piano and things like that, and studied that all through college. I grew up in Iowa, went to undergrad in South Dakota at a small liberal arts school, and it's a great school, but I felt like I wasn't quite fitting in the right place. I knew that I wanted to do more things, and so I was really excited about being in more involved musical experiences. And when you're in a smaller school, sometimes you don't have access to doing larger opera productions or theater productions. And we had some of that. So I was kind of like grasping for all of those experiences through high school and college, and knew that I wanted more. And I graduated early from college, took a year to save money so that I could do the whole audition thing for grad school. I think a big part of my story is also figuring out how to bring resources into my life so that I could make music possible. And so there's lots of day jobs that always go along with all of these things. And so I worked and, auditioned at all these grad schools and got into Peabody. And I knew that I wanted to go. It just was the right vibe for what I was looking for. And also just a school that had a lot of things going on. So I knew that I could get a lot of musical experiences by being there. And I did my master's at Peabody from 2007 to 2009, and then stayed in Baltimore until 2014. And I really credit the Baltimore new music scene at that time period. So from kind of 2007 to 2014 for being my musical crucible, for being like my musical incubator is probably an even more positive way of thinking about it. And I was able to be involved in so many things. And also there's a lot of do-it-yourself energy in Baltimore. And I started a house concert series. I started the blog, The Sybaritic Singer, that has continued to this day. And that a lot of people tend to kind of come into contact with my work through that, and on the coaching and audience development, creative placemaking side. I was working these day jobs and wanted these experiences kind of after my master's, and just did a ton of stuff. Like my resume during that time period was just like, now I'm doing this, now I'm doing this, now like, because I think I came into contact with that Ira Glass quote that's, quite long, and he sums it up with do a lot of work, because the idea is that you never really know who you are as an artist until you put yourself through experiences and say, well, that wasn't it, but this was, you know. And then, I really did take that to heart by saying like, okay, well, you don't know what your spark is. You don't know what your magic is until you put yourself in the situation. Some of them aren't going to be great. You know, some of them are just going to be projects that don't really go anywhere. Some of them are going to be, you know, experiences that you're like, well, I learned from that and now I'm not doing it again. But then that like sets you up for all of the ones that do come together, and you have these things where you're like, oh, I have to have more of that in my life. and those feelings, the feelings that you get when you're with like the right collaborators, when you are engaged in something that feels bigger than yourself. I've lived in different places. My work has been kind of focused around commissioning and performing new music for the voice in lots of different settings. I do a lot of work in chamber music, which I really, really love. And on the side, or kind of like within the mix with teaching, I do a lot of coaching and consulting work that also has to do a lot with arts marketing, arts communication, and just helping creatives feel like they have access to the things they really want in their life. You know, sometimes we get stuck and we feel like, I can't have that thing. And it's just because maybe we don't know what the steps are, or we don't have somebody that says like, yeah, you can do it. Let's figure out a way. And so there's a big part of my coaching consulting life that feeds that connectivity side, that ability to be a positive force in other people's musical lives, their creative lives. So I think that gives you some like kind of murky path of where I've been.
Well, all those things, especially the reassurance of you can do this. This is not inaccessible to you, is so important and feeds artists. Like we all need more of that and more encouragement that yes, like this is the right thing to do. And sometimes you're right, like different projects and things aren't the right fit necessarily, but overall, yeah, that's amazing.
Well, I wonder if you three had this experience. My very formative voice teacher in my life, so the person that I was studying with at the end of high school, and I told her, you know, I wanted to go to college for music education. I wanted to be a choir director because like that was the most important thing in my life at that point in time. And she said, Renee, and she said, Megan, have you ever thought about performing? What? Me? I don't know. Do you think I could? Like, and she just was like, yeah, I think you might. Like, and I took that very seriously because I come from a musical family and a theater, arts, music education family. So people working in the arts was not foreign to me, you know, was not unknown, but people being professional performers was something that was like, no, you don't do that. Like, that's not a thing. And then to hear someone that you love and trust so much say like, would you like this thing? And I said like, what, I can have that. And I have clung to that experience as like a permission slip. And so I always think about that, like when I'm working with my collaborators or when I'm, you know, just in our community in general, I always think about, am I showing up with permission slips, or am I showing up with hurdles? Am I showing up with barriers for people? Am I showing up with gatekeeping? Am I showing up with those things? Or am I the person who's just like Oprah, like throwing out permission slips, like, we got this, yo.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads to the next question, Megan, and that is, I mean, I know you largely from Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems sometimes Twitter gets a bad rap, I think, and social media does, but I have found Twitter to be such a great place to find cheerleaders such as yourself. So I was just wondering, what role do you think the advent of social media has had on the chamber music community, the new music community? I know that especially with new music, there's like the new music group and you all have chats and happy hours and I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. I was interviewing for a job at meetup.com in New York right after grad school. And I was on Facebook. I was doing stuff like on social media. And I had this interview. I was like 3 interviews into the process, by the way. We're like, really talking about it. And they said, "Oh, what are your feelings on Twitter?" And I said something like, "Who cares about what you ate for breakfast? Blah, blah, blah," thinking I was so funny. Ugh. And I will never forget the look on their faces. It was just like, they went from, to silence, like crickets. And I was just like, okay.
Moving on.
You better believe I went home from that, joined Twitter, and I was like, okay, if I've just lost this job because I didn't understand the power of Twitter, then I'm going to figure it out. And so I, joined it, and I realized the beautiful part about some of the more open platforms where you can just follow, you don't have to have a kind of both like a mutual connection. You don't have to have a friend saying yes, I will accept your friend request kind of thing, is that you can just follow people, and you can also create these micro communities around your interests. You can find people that are talking about the things. And at that point in time, Twitter, there were composers and performers talking about new music stuff. And I was just like, oh, I can chat with them like right here, we could just talk and just started developing conversations or talking about the things that I was working on in Baltimore at the time. And it was really cool to see. What I love so much is seeing all of these different pockets, all of these different scenes around the country and internationally, right? That all of these different scenes around newly composed music or improvised music, experimental music, and how they're kind of connected, who's talking to who, what they're talking about, what do they like, and that was so interesting. And so, Twitter has been such a great resource for me. And whenever I talk about this with younger people, and I have professors that will say, "Oh, don't you think that all these students should be on Twitter?" And I said, "No, but I do want you to look for where you have access to people who are talking about the things that you want to talk about." And it could be Twitter, come on over, come join it, and find me, I'll chat you up. But where is your community congregating and having kind of more open conversations where you can just show up to the party? You don't have to have the piece of paper from somewhere. You don't have to go to the, thousands of dollar conference just to say hi for 20 seconds, but you can start building those relationships casually through these interactions. And then when you do go to a conference, I think that, we've met kind of, except for Sarah and I haven't met in person, but we've crossed paths at conferences. And I think having this kind of passing knowledge about what we're into on social media helps us make deeper relationships when we see each other in person.
My husband's a saxophonist, and we go each year to the Navy Band Saxophone Symposium. And I was telling Sarah and Erica about it. And, Erica mentioned, she's like, "Look at Megan Ihnen. She's really big on Twitter. We chat, etc." And so we did. So it was really cool to see you and meet you. And because of that, I went to one of your performances at the Navy Band Symposium and saw you and Alan Tyson in Megan Ihnen and Alan Tyson present. And it was just captivating. I specifically remember the piece Pop, Chew, Swallow. That stuck out to me. It still resonates. Was that the world premiere of that piece?
Yeah, we did 3 world premieres on that concert.
That's right.
The Navy Band loves some world premieres. So and Erica, I think that you had actually just had dinner with Alan right before that too. And so I really love in new music how we all have these, you know, interconnected lives, and we kind of bounce ideas off of each other, and you can really see things kind of that interconnectivity is just really cool. For anyone who may not have heard of my duo, Megan Ihnen and Alan Tyson Present is a voice and saxophone duo. And we are currently, well, before this, you know, the pandemic situation, we were about to launch like the official premiere of our second touring production called Black Meridian. And we did some very specific curating for this program. And Neil's piece is the culmination of the first part of that show. And Black Meridian takes as its central thesis kind of black holes as a metaphor for broken relationships and this kind of inexorable track towards something, you know, you don't know if it's good or not. I really wanted to use black holes as this metaphor and then continue that metaphor through into the music, but without too heavy a hand. I took the idea of gravity condensing as you get towards a black hole and said, okay, let's connect that to the music and ask the composers to write an increasing heavier and heavier groove, right? So we're gonna ask each composer, and so you'll hear in the first portion of Black Meridian that the pieces get kind of more and more rhythmically like driving. And I think that you probably noticed that, Michelle, in that piece, that it is a full on to the end, like, and it starts off, you know, just storytelling open. And then we get into kind of like, you know, a 7/16 at like, like you super fast tempos, and we're like just clicking like all the way to the end. And Pop Chew Swallow is about confrontation with your own addiction to opioids. And the driving quality of that piece comes from like the central character saying I'm not going to do this anymore. Like, I'm not going to do this, and I have to stop myself. Like, but it's that moment where you're like, you're right on the edge, and the only thing you're trying, like, you're just pulling internally with all your strength to like come away from the choice that you're about to make, and you're not entirely sure if you can not make the choice, you know. And so that piece is really important to me. And I think that while Black Meridian is not about, you know, a drug addiction like struggle, that piece fits very well into that kind of story that we're trying to tell. And then the composers didn't know each other, and then didn't know necessarily what everybody was writing about. And so part of how Alan and I approach curating our shows is to create this kind of overall narrative structure for a performance. And each one of those pieces fits the spot as you're going, and you're kind of experiencing this trajectory. And you as the audience get to have this feeling of, you know, you're the omniscient, you know, audience member at that point going, I know how this is going to go. or are they going to do it? Like you know, but you don't know. And then I love that, and have been mourning that quality of being with an audience recently. I'm not sure if you feel the same way. And
100%. Yes.
Yeah. And there's I like to say in my kind of artist statement about the work that I do, that I'm devoted to creating liminal spaces in which humans can approach and understand their most profound feelings, which we don't always do necessarily, except for those moments like kind of in darkened theaters and on your therapist's couch, and like, but it doesn't have to be. When we do that in the theater together, you're with other people that are having an experience. You're not necessarily looking at each other, so you still get to have your own experience there, and you know that there are other people going through that with you, but it's still yours. And it's not as it's not as clinical. You get to kind of come in and out of where you want to be with those profound feelings. And I am just obsessed with that. I'm obsessed with that feeling of performance. And so that's the thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is, okay, I don't think that like now's not a time that I can create those situations in a theater for us to all have together, but I can definitely do the work that gets it ready for when we can.
Absolutely. And that's so important, because preparation and making sure, like, how much time does it take to curate those pieces? How much time do you and Alan spend really contemplating the trajectory of the show?
Yeah.
So talk to us about your ensemble, Megan, Ihnen, and Alan Tyson Present. How did you guys come to be? We talked about obviously the performance side first, but what led to this?
I think you'll like this story a lot, because if you know Alan Tyson, then this will not surprise you at all. I was doing a recital in New York with the trio, but at the time it was just Jennifer Ellis, the harpist, and I were working together, and we worked on this Heart of Darkness recital together, and performed that in New York. And I needed one solo voice piece that fit this theme, but that also, like, just to kind of fill out the time that it needed, right? We were just like right in that spot where you're like, nah, it needs one more thing, right? So I put it out on Twitter, of course. And I said, anybody got one of these? And Alan was like, well, I think I have a solo voice piece that's, not very long, and it's on this text by Rilke, and I think that it suits your theme. And I was like, I looked at it and I was like, this is great. This is exactly what I needed. Thank you. Like, months go by. I message him like the day of the performance, and I was like, hey, I realized I don't know how to say your last name, and I have to announce this piece from the stage. So help. And he was like, yeah, it's like Tyson, like the chicken. And I was like, oh, cool, thanks. From there, I was like, oh, the performance went really well. So we're talking, and, just like the kind of just chatting about new music stuff, and like that we all do. And then we met up for New Music Gathering in Baltimore. And at some point, I remember we're out for drinks with Mara Gibson, Garrett Schumann, and, like Michael Hall, all of our like kind of friends all at this table. And Alan goes, Megan, we should really play a show together sometime. And I was like, sure, that's going to happen. Like, not that I was like, don't want to work with you, but that way that like, people are like, we should get coffee together. And I was like, right. Like, you live in North Carolina, I live in Iowa. Cool. And then we left that experience. And like a couple months later, I get this like email that's like, hey, I got a 20-minute song cycle written for us. Do you think we could plan a show together? And I was like,
okay.
I was like, you're very sneaky. Yeah, I see you. Okay. Like, and so I was like, oh, okay. So you just went and commissioned that? Okay. I am going to go and book us 3 shows. Boom. There. Done. Like,
got it.
He comes to Iowa. We did like a 3-show tour as like our first shows ever. And it was like, we started, that very first performance was kind of lots of solo pieces for us. And then like the premiere of this song cycle, a couple other things. We played like a Lori Laitman piece. We played a couple other things. And we really enjoyed working together. And when you know that you can talk to each other in the same way in a rehearsal setting, I find that to be an incredibly important quality for the collaborators that I work with the most regularly. They don't all have the same like rehearsal language, but we can talk to each other, right, in rehearsal, and it just like, it makes sense. We're able to communicate effectively and positively and make choices together, and that's really satisfying. So we had that great experience, and we were like, we should do this. So we like commissioned like a couple more pieces, like, and then started like building tours and doing all of this stuff. And part of that duo is I told him, I do a lot of freelance performance work, and I am constantly singing new things that I only get to do once in my life. And I was like, and it bums me out when I only get to sing something one time. It's like, I'm really craving an ensemble where we tour like a band, and like I get to do a show, and we do that show a bunch. I get to like put those composers' works out there and like do them a whole lot. And Alan was on board for that. And so I think that that's a big part about why our ensemble why we were so committed to doing the work. And also because we were touring the same show, This World of Yes, we toured that to like something like 30 places, like in a year or whatever. And that helped build some kind of name recognition because it was like the same thing. People knew about it in a great way. And so that's been really cool. And I'm so excited. So Black Meridian will be the same way. We'll tour that for quite a while. And then the third show is kind of like in pre-production phases right now. And so because This World of Yes just kind of came together and we're like, I guess we're doing this and now we're touring. Okay, cool. All of that when we started thinking about like, well, we should build a new show. We started kind of building show 2 and 3 kind of around the same time. So like one of them is like a little faster on track. And then the other one is like kind of building piece by piece. And I think that's why like we thought that Black Meridian would premiere, oh my gosh, probably like a year ago. Like we were thinking it'd premiere like last spring. And just like the logistics of commissioning a lot of composers and making sure that everything is together and staged and ready to go. You're always figuring it out.
For sure. And it's always evolving. And that's really cool what you said about, wanting to play a piece more than one time. Like your first show is going to be probably pretty different and have a lot more depth the 16th time you do it,
Yeah. Yes.
And you really get to dive into the composer's feelings and thoughts and it's not passive anymore. Not that it was at the beginning, but it's different when you really sit with works for an extended period of time.
Totally. It's night and day, like, and just, and we, challenging repertoire, there's a lot of performances where you just make sure you show up at the double bar together and like, and like everybody has that experience and we're all very dedicated players and performers and we work really hard on making sure that rep like sounds good for the performance. But you have those performances where you're like, okay, we did it, right? And I was just like, I need to stay in music the way that I want to. I need to have a deeper connection to get to do these things more so that I'm getting to the part of performing where it's not just, did we make it together? But more like, getting to embody that the fullest performance that you can do. That part is when you can get to that, you're feeling good, girl. Like, right. Yeah.
And I would think too that means so much to the composers with whom you're working, because my experience from talking with composers is that so many of them have the experience, like you said, where they'll write a piece and they put in so much heart and soul and time. Mm-hmm. But then that piece might only be performed once, ever, right? Mm-hmm. And so what you're giving them is this incredible gift of yourself and the relationship that you're building with them and with their music. Yeah. And I would think that would it seems like you're so much about relationships too. So that's just largely you and the gift of you. So that's really awesome. And a testament to what you're doing. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely about relationships, and it's definitely about getting to have that experience together. Because there's the turn and burn aspect of new music. Sometimes it leaves something to be desired for me as a musician, as a performer, and just as a collaborator. So I think, Erica, exactly what you're saying. And I want composers to know that that's what I want to bring to the table. And so they can also put that same amount of time and effort and care into their scores for me, because I want to be able to do that together. And I know that there are composers out there that like, God knows composers that like work every day on a score and they like give it to you like it's their baby, right? And then like those same composers are also like, you know, popping something out in 24 hours and they're like, I've worked so hard on this. And I'm like, wait, there's words missing here. Like what? So we all are those people, just different days, different times. Like, and I think if I can, I'm the only person in charge of my career and my life and how I want to show up as a musician. And so if I don't want that from composers, then I need to make sure that I'm showing up to them the same way, which says like, I'm going to devote time to this. I'm going to devote passion and energy to this. And so, you know, and that I want more of that. That doesn't always happen. Like I'm definitely like a fallible person, human in this situation. But that's what I ascribe to, and that's what I like aspire to. So
I saw that you also run workshops on creative placemaking, and I'm wondering, you've talked a lot about the spaces where people are transformed and relationships, and it seems like all that ties together, but creative placemaking, it can be kind of hard to get your arms around, like this. Yeah. And so I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about that, because I think that concept is really fascinating as well.
Yeah. Well, and I came into contact with like the idea of creative placemaking, probably 6-7 years ago, something like that. And I was like, what's this now? and it really gave me like a lot of words to apply to the thing that I was feeling, you know, that the interest that I have in music. And I was, you know, thinking about going back to what I was saying about like being obsessive about liminal space and stuff like that. That also means I'm obsessive about audience experience, audience development, and then that feeling that we're all in this together in that ecosystem, right? And I've been thinking about, and Baltimore was such a great, like I said, that incubator feeling, because I really saw a lot of different aspects, like different sides of the ecosystem, all working together and how it informs, right? And that's, I'm going to take a quick detour and come back for that, which is, I started writing the Sybaritic Singer because I wanted to review things, and because I wanted to test myself to say, like, do I have things to say about music and about performance? How am I contributing to this in a written sense? And for the longest time, my blog was Tim Smith Can't Be Everywhere, because Tim Smith was a major like arts critic for the Baltimore Sun. And so like just my blog was like just calling him out, like you can't be everywhere, like I have to go to some things too. Like but it's true. And I had this great like, you know, moment where Tim Smith and I had coffee together, and he's like, well, you know, Megan, you're right, I can't be everywhere. And I was like, oh my God, this is really and he was like, he shared with me that at the Sun at the time, he couldn't review anything that wasn't scheduled to have performances for 2 weekends or more in a row. And so there was so much of the Baltimore art scene that was happening, but DIY culture, you're doing it one weekend, right? You're doing one show, right? It might be the coolest show that's happening like in that like semester or something like that, but it's only happening once and it's not making it in the paper. And I started to realize how dependent we are on all of the facets of who makes up an arts culture. But then I started to realize that with creative placemaking, that the arts and culture serves the community, and we do that together. And then creative placemaking is really about shared identity that is reinforced through arts and culture. And that's the creative placemaking side. Placemaking is just about shared identity through place, right? Like Boston Strong, like we all happen to live here, and there's something about living here that makes us strong, right? That idea. And so, but then you think of, we've talked about music cities, right? And I think you think of Austin, you think of Nashville, like there are people that live there that have nothing to do with music, like they're not professionally in music whatsoever, but it is part of their identity that they live in a music city, you know, that they go hear live music whenever they want to, you know. And think about everybody we know that lives in New York, right? And how being in New York and having the city that never sleeps, that has music, culture, food, events, all sorts of stuff happening at every hour of the night and day. Like, and what that reinforces in you as part of your identity. And a lot of my work is devoted towards people that are working in scenes that have a lot of stuff going on, but they don't have that same cachet kind of across the country as like, oh, it's a new music hub, right? Or it's and we think of like, yes and no, but like we think of new music happening in like New York, Chicago, LA, you can probably name like a couple other places, like, and then, but we have new music people that are making stuff everywhere, and are significant contributors to their community through the work that they do in their creative work. How do the arts, how does culture reinforce identity through these different things like access and linkages, like networks of people, all that kind of stuff? Where is music helping to make our lives more efficient? Where does it make us more connected as people? All of that kind of stuff.
That is really, really powerful. And it gives me lots of ideas for our own space here, you know? Yeah, that's really
So what
great.
are you thinking about with your space?
Well, chamber music is our passion, right? Yeah. And so that is kind of our focus. But we've got lots of beautiful spaces around here in Roanoke. And I think just even exploring that, bringing music to creative and interesting spaces, natural spaces, could be something that's really cool.
I love it. We'll keep talking about it. Like, you're thinking about how are we reinforcing this community with the work that we're doing with our music making work, and where are we putting ourselves so that people have the happy accident of coming into contact with music, you know, and how do we make sure that when they do, they're experiencing it in a way that leads to a more wholehearted life for them, right? And it's about, you know, we're in this together, and I'm providing this service. And when we talk about classical music, I mean, we end up being like, well, they need to hear this, and you're like, they don't need what, like, whatever. But like, but it's really thinking about, you know, how am I showing up for my community, and in the work that I'm doing, how am I being of service here? So I think that creative placemaking allows me to have some of that that connection to service-based mindset, and in the wonderful world of new music, where it's like lots of unfamiliar sounds, maybe sometimes challenging sounds, and where is that still, like, how can I take all of that and go, this is still a service to my community? How? Why? What am I going to do with this? And I think that also helps me talk about the economics of music for lots of musicians, so that when we think about being a community member and we think about the ecosystem of music, we are thinking about how are we bringing resources into that community so that we're all participating in a sustainable system, and how are we sustaining each other, you know? So those kinds of things are big passion areas of mine.
That's so cool. So I think there's a lot of takeaways for people who are just starting out on their journey. For everything that you've said, you just have such incredible ideas around music and art, that it would be hard to pick just one thing. But if and when you talk to young musicians who, their context is different.
Yeah, for sure.
What is the one thing that you tend to impart to them, or would like to impart to them?
When I was teaching, so before this current kind of setup of my kind of professional life, I was teaching adjunct, and I also had a private studio. And in my private studio, I had kind of eighth graders through high school students. And I loved working with those students, and just, they were so excited, and also like just really passionate about what they wanted to do. And also just like, you know, really focused on like, I want to get into show choir. And I was like, I feel you. I know that life. But so part of what was so special about working with them was asking them like, what are you working on right now? What are you thinking about? And so when I started my lessons with my students, I always asked them to give me 2 intentions for that lesson. So it was just like baked into the process at the beginning. We always just like, hey, how are you? Okay, what are your 2 intentions for this lesson? Can be anything, right? But it definitely provided this moment for them to tell me what was important to them. And then for me to show up for them and say like, I'm going to help you do that. And it could be anything. Like it could be, I'm having a rough day and I just want to be able to focus on this and not think about anything else. And I'm like, got you. Like, or, you know, I want to talk to you about applying for music school, you know, like, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm here for that, you know? And at the end of lessons, I would give them this little spiel where I'd say, over many, many years of teaching, I've realized that when I say, what kinds of questions, or like, what questions do you have for me? Like, what do you want to know? They'd be like, I don't know. I've never had a question in my life. Like, oh my God. I'm like, please don't. And so I would give them this spiel to say, you know, so I changed it. And at the end of every lesson, I say, ask me a question. And it's in a very positive way. And I said, one of the most important things that you can develop is being comfortable with questions and asking questions and developing a questioning mindset, because kind of like I said, you're the only one in charge of your musical life and, well, your life in general, but like you're the only one in charge of what you learn, what you find out, what you want to know more about, what you want to bring into your life, you know. And in learning how to ask questions is so fundamental to getting to where you want to be in life. And I found so often that my students, and very like, you know, checklister types, like they just want to get everything right. They just want to be told that they're doing it right all the time. And I got to flip it around and be like, by learning how to ask questions, you're doing it right. And so that became very important to me, and something that I definitely try to kind of just infuse whenever I'm working with younger people. You see how incentivized we are to know everything, right? Like in this situation, you know, I'm incentivized to be like, oh, let me share how smart I am in this situation. But also like when we're together, I ask you questions too. And I'm like, I need to know this. Like, I need you to tell me all these things.
Yes.
And when we think about this when we build that into who we are, that kind of curiosity, it means that we're less afraid to call up that program director and be like, hey, what would make my grant application stronger? Like what would allow me to get into that thing? Like, you know, if you start building that into your life, there's no expiration date on it, you know, and it can only get stronger and help you to be the person who knows how to ask questions. Oh my gosh, can you guys think of all those like Q&As at something that you've gone to, and they're like, okay, well, we're going to take questions now. And it could be somebody that you are dying to talk to, and you're like, oh my God, I just don't know. Like, and have you been on the other side of that when you're like sitting on a panel and like nobody has questions, and you're like,
somebody has to say something.
Right. Yeah, you're like, great. Wow. Crushing it up here. Feeling real great. Everybody wants to know. And so that goes back to that kind of like, we're all in it together. You know, whoever's on stage, whoever's kind of like ostensibly answering questions, and the people who are asking questions and like listening and taking it in, we're all in that together. Same as the performer-listener relationship. Like we're all like that. And so those Q&A, if I'm in your audience, I'm like ready. I'm like, hey, so you talked about advertising in the thing. Great. Okay, I'm ready. Like, you know, but I just want to show up for people and be like, yes, you have great ideas. Like, let me reinforce that. And it has this beautiful knock-on effect of people remember you when you ask questions, you know, and
Absolutely.
and so then you can always say like, oh, you know, follow up with them later and be like, you know, I'd really like to know more about that thing. To be interesting, you have to be interested. Like, yeah. And you just can't, people will think that you're really interesting if you've spent time being interested in other people. And that never stops.
So now is the grab bag portion of the interview. We're going to do a quick round of this or that.
Uh-huh.
Yes, yeah. The first one is coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee.
Coffee, yeah.
Yeah.
Coffee.
Tea.
Oh. Okay.
Oh, it's me. Okay, cats or dogs?
Oh, dogs. I have a fear of cats.
Me too. Their claws. And
Yes.
like, they fight.
Yes. So dogs.
Dogs. Dogs.
Can I have both? Do I have to pick?
You have to pick this or that.
Dogs, I guess dogs, yeah.
We won't tell your cat.
Oh, yeah.
No.
He's mean anyway. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say he wouldn't like it.
Okay, I think this one's the hardest. I don't know what I would pick. Mountains or the beach?
Ooh. Beach.
I think I have to say mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you two?
I'm mountains for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I think the beach. It's a nice change of pace because we live in it.
There you go.
Oh,
All
see,
right,
there you
that's fair.
go. Yeah. That one's hard. That's,
Yeah. Agreed.
I don't want to live that kind of life where I have to choose between these things.
All right, last grab bag portion. This is not this or that.
Okay.
This is just fun, non-musical.
Okay.
All right, Sarah.
What's your best Instagram follow?
Okay. I really like, so I've got some friends in a band called Outcalls, and I just love their Instagram. They're great. They take amazing photos, and then also their stories are like equally great. So that's my choice.
Awesome. Got it.
All right, you gonna go?
Oh, we're going around. I don't like it.
You can abstain. You can.
I abstain.
I don't know if he follows me, but Anthony McGill commented on one of our videos, and I was like, I just floated around for like 4 days. I was like, oh, no.
That's amazing. Isn't that amazing? Like,
yeah,
just something like that makes your day be like, yeah.
The whole 4 days, and also currently, still like, I remember that time. That was dope.
That was dope. Yes.
I don't know if she follows me, but I like Jolene Flute a lot. She's a teacher and a
So cute.
flutist. I think she does some
I
cool
love
stuff.
it. Well, I hope they hear this and then they follow you. Like,
Anthony McGill.
You're like, hey.
I'm gonna tag him.
Yeah.
Watch this whole thing.
It'll be our short, like 60-second Instagram video is just us talking about Anthony McGill.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
All right, the next question is, can you describe the biggest musical disaster you've ever had?
We're in there. We are in there.
We're making it real there.
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, I think the one that probably like haunts me the most was I was covering a role once and didn't have it fully memorized and got like the talking to of my life for it, and I was just like, Megan, like, what have you done? And also like it was early in my career, and there was definitely a line which was like, well, you probably haven't been in shows like this before, so you may not know how it works. And I was just like,
oh no.
And that, so those moments when you, like, there's no hope in saving, because the saving takes months and months of work, and you didn't do it. Like, you did not like put in that time. That was definitely helpful in that like deep shame that changes your life moment where I was like, okay, well, this could never happen again. And but I definitely still feel it, and like I don't think that, I wish that it wasn't as shaming as it was, but yeah, so that's probably my biggest musical disaster. I mean, everything else is just like, everything is like tech falls apart. Like, yeah, great. Like, like the earth is round. Like, and yeah, that's, so we learn.
Yeah, indeed. That's tough. I'm sorry.
It was me though,
I'm sorry
I
about that.
like messed it up.
I have something very similar, so I'll just confess. So when I was auditioning for music school, for some reason, I think because my auditions, I couldn't be at two places in the same weekend. Mm-hmm. So for Eastman, I did the audition at the teacher's home, and it was Super Bowl Sunday or something, whatever. And he was having this like big studio party. It was really intimidating. But anyway, so I went, and I was supposed to play this piece by George Crumb, and it had 3 movements to it. And guess how many movements I had practiced? Like 2, right? But of course, I put that I knew the whole thing on my audition thing, because whoever asks for the last movement.
Oh no.
So, but there was no time constraint, because I was at his house and he was chilling and ready for his Super Bowl party.
Oh, no.
So I played the first 2 movements, and then he said, he got this really goofy grin on his face, and he said, because the 3rd movement's really hard, and he said, so you know the 3rd movement? And I said, yeah.
You doubled down. Oh no.
So he said, okay, let's
do it.
And I was like,
oh boy. High risk, high reward. How did it turned
really
out
bad.
okay, didn't it?
So anyway, so it was really bad. But like you, Megan, I mean, I learned like this humongous lesson, right? Because after I flailed and I just fell apart, and he kind of looked at me with this grin on his face, he was like, okay, so I hope that you've learned something from this. He said, like, either don't say that you have it ready, or when I ask you to play it, just say, oh, I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have to go right now.
So I learned. It's stuck with me.
I think it's important to talk about, like, and not to, like, not to call out other people's, like, things if you're not willing to call out your own and be like, yeah, I really effed that up. Like, and we all have those moments, like, throughout our careers, and when you're up against it, like that phrase that's like, well, you've survived 100% of your bad days, like that, those are those moments for sure, and they stick with you, and you gotta like do some inner work on those puppies, but like, but at the same time, I think it's important to, if anybody who is earlier in their career than me stumbles upon like this part of our talk, and they're like, okay, yeah, so like I'm gonna mess up sometime, and it's gonna happen, and I'm gonna come back out and like keep trying, that kind of stuff. So
yeah, learn those lessons, give yourself some grace.
Yeah. And like that teacher gave me grace. I went and studied with him. I mean, it wasn't a big deal to him, and he's probably been in that same place.
And be that kind of teacher, right? Be that kind of like colleague who's like, when you see somebody that like is flailing, and you're like, oh, hey buddy, hey, let's talk about that for a second. This is probably not how you saw this going. Would you like, and like, where you can still reinforce a standard and say like, well, I would like to make sure that like my company, my studio, my school, my department, whatever, that in this department, we abide by these standards, and this isn't it, but I know that you'll come back from it, that kind of thing. Like, be that person.
Yeah. and act like a human.
Yeah. Right. Oh.
Yeah, it's so hard. So hard.
You know, people sometimes they don't have that in their own lives, and they forget. Like, you know, they're trying to reinforce that they're important, and at the expense of people who have less agency than they do. So.
Oh, that's real. That's real. All right, last question. In your opinion, best late night talk show?
Oh. I abstain? I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't watch any.
Oh no!
I'm so sorry. I really love John Oliver though. So if Last Week Tonight counts,
that's it. Boom. There you go.
then that's it.
Okay. That's good. Erica, Sarah, do you guys watch
No.
late night?
Sometimes YouTube clips like that float around, you know,
Right.
social media, but
Oh yeah, you hit the highlights. You get the best of.
I like Trevor Noah. I like his accent.
Yeah.
He pulls out these great accents, like his South, Africa, or I don't know if he's South African.
Mhm.
He
Anyway,
is.
and I just
And
love
his-
his accent when he goes there. It's so great.
Yeah.
I've got his book. I'll bring it to you. It's called Born a Crime. It's incredible.
I would love to read it because I think
It's
he's
so good.
and I just love the fact that I love his perspective from having not grown up here in America.
Right.
And then to hear his take on what's going on here is fascinating to me.
Yeah, because he was born in South Africa during the apartheid.
Right.
And so it's
Yeah.
yeah, I'm bringing you his book tomorrow. Social distance, I'll leave it on your doorstep.
How are you all, ensemble wise? I don't know if you see each other. Are you practicing? Are you are you able to see each other? Or are you just kind of thinking about the future, brainstorming together, like socially distanced?
Yeah, like sort of all of those things. I mean, we'll be together for the first time in a rehearsal next Tuesday at a big open sort of sanctuary church situation. We're doing a live stream concert next Thursday, but we haven't played together since the beginning of March.
Yeah.
So we are putting together our concert and our rehearsal and doing the concert that following Thursday. And we've talked a lot about, and sort of to echo what you've talked about, this is opening doors for creativity. We're interviewing women that inspire us and, talking to, women all over the world and sort of finding a new path to sort of navigate through this, but still staying connected.
Yeah. Well, and I saw that you talked to one of my other main collaborators, Marianne Parker, recently.
Yeah.
Yay! So I hope that was Marianne's such a wonderful soul, and so I'm sure it was a great conversation.
Yeah, she is. We went to grad school together at Tennessee, so it was really cool to sort of reconnect with her and just to chat and see what she's been up to. She's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, I could stay on here until tomorrow, but unfortunately, we'll
do this again.
Yeah, for sure. And I think
Mhm.
my first point about this taking 14 different interviews, it absolutely could. So we might have a Megan Ihnen part. Duh.
Oh my gosh, that would be too much.
But we're so thrilled to have you with us. And thank you again for your time and efforts and your energy and everything that you contribute to the world, your community, and the new music scene and everything that you do. Is awesome.
Well, I'm so thankful to be here with all of you. This has been really nice. And as someone who's kind of, quarantining alone, this has been really important to connect like this and kind of talk about big goals, talk about things that we've learned, talk about, fears, talk about things we've overcome, all of that stuff. It really makes a big difference in my life. So thank you for asking me to do this and for, being there to talk through those big topics with me.
Awesome.
Our pleasure.
Awesome.
our pleasure.
Yeah. All right. We really appreciate you, and we will talk very, very soon. Okay. Bye.